You are listening to the Compass Podcast. We navigate people to God each week by discussing the latest message from our series and hope you find the encouragement through the conversation.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for the Compass Podcast. I'm Brooks, the online campus pastor, and today I've got Alex Brown, and Alex is one of our Colleyville Student Pastors, and I've also got Zack Moody, our Colleyville Student Worship Pastor, even though our website says otherwise, but that's what he claims his title is.
It's so funny.
Thanks for being here, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
This is really fun. So we're in this series at the movies, and our podcast has been all about that. So what have you thought about it so far?
My first question is just, why is there not popcorn with us right now?
Oh my gosh.
Big miss.
Nobody's asked that yet. I've failed. I'm going to have to do that for the next one.
Better question, butter or kettle corn?
Oh.
Butter, always.
You're kettle. I think I'm kettle corn too. Because I think of the fair when I think of kettle corn.
Oh, yeah. Fair is kettle corn, movie theater, layered butter.
Yeah. I couldn't do kettle corn in a movie theater. No. I think it depends on the context. Popcorn is a very contextual snack.
Does.
But I don't even like popcorn all that much. Are you in the pot? Do you guys like popcorn?
I'm not a huge popcorn person. I don't really eat carbs anymore.
I love popcorn.
Is popcorn a carb?
My wife loves Is popcorn a carb?
I think it's a carb. It looks like a carb.
I have no idea if it's a carb.
And I feel like it's a carb when I eat it.
I feel like it's like eating nothing.
Thin, like the little thin
Some
bread
kernels.
nuts or something.
I will say there's something magical about popcorn and M&Ms together.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway, popcorn's great. Now so we watched this movie where the river divides. I had not seen this movie until a few days ago. I didn't go to see. You guys went to CIY because you're both student pastors. They showed this film at CIY, and I think we kind of decided this was a message we were going to do?
They showed this video both to our junior high and high school students at summer camp, which honestly, if you're listening right now and you have a kid, make sure they're coming to camp with us this next summer.
Yeah.
Just a side plug right there. Camp changes everything in students' lives. But yeah, they showed this movie, and it wrecked our student ministry.
It did. It was really cool and moving to see students who have extended family that come from an area like that. So it hit home for them. It was very personal.
Wow.
From what their family had experienced. So it was really cool for a lot of our other students to get to be more personal with that. And for a lot of them, it was eye-opening of, wait, this happens in the world? I had no idea.
I was going to ask what the response was from students seeing a film like this, thinking, oh, persecution is still that's a real thing coming from America, where it's not our definition of persecution. Would you agree is definitely different from what is experienced elsewhere?
And just to take it to that next level, it's persecution from within your own family.
Yeah.
Your father, who is supposed to be your biggest advocate, be on your side, is actually, in his mind, doesn't think he's doing wrong. But for our kids to see that your family would do that they were just speechless.
So if you haven't seen the movie, here's what it's about, because it's kind of hard to find. Like I had to really search to find this film, where it's not something you can just find on Amazon Prime or Netflix. Like I found it on some random website, and I was like, oh, okay, here we go. Fantastic film. It's only 33 minutes.
Yep, quick.
It's a really short film, but it's a story that is super transformational, but it follows Dennis. And it follows his story. And because of his belief, he becomes a Christian, was part of this tribe, becomes a Christian, comes back, and he's ostracized to the point of basically being killed, right?
Yeah.
For his faith. But despite the conflict, I think the film's kind of overarching message is one of unity and a shared sort of human experience that transcends linguistics and religious boundaries. It's really about this whole concept of, hey, can we come together regardless of our beliefs, and how does God work through these sorts of contexts and situations, right? So there's these three characters that you follow in the story. There's Mary, there's Okath, and there's Dennis.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a true story, which I actually didn't, it sounds silly, but I actually didn't know that it was a true story until I watched it.
Yeah, it's one of those where it is such a powerful and moving, eye-opening thing to watch that you think, there's no way this could be real. How could this happen? But it is, which makes it even more powerful for us to be sitting here to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I would say that a lot of our students, I think this was the first time they saw this film and they realized they come from a broken family. They didn't know that. I know that I came from a broken family, and I did not know I was in a broken family till I was in college and realized that my normal was not actually normal. And so a lot of our students were able to identify with one of these three characters. One of our girls said, my mom is a witch doctor. And so it really hit home.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have Mary's story, and Mary was Dennis's wife that you follow, right? And what I loved about the message on Sunday was we used Ephesians 4:32, which, it says, be kind to each other, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, just as God through Christ has forgiven you. And I think a big part of her story is that forgiveness piece.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of times easier said than done.
Yeah.
Is what we believe. Because if you've ever been in a position where you have been hurt or wronged, it's really easy to just live with that anger, to live with that hurt. It almost becomes more comfortable to do that than to actually do the hard work to work through it.
Yeah.
And so we get complacent in this place of holding on to it because we are a people that want justice. We're people that want those who have done wrong to be punished. And the thing about following Jesus is we may not see that here on this side of earth. We may not be able to, even if there is, a justice, it may not be in the way that we want it.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of times we hold on to that because we're just waiting for that moment for them to be told that they were wrong. But really it's hurting us. And so there's just that misconception of forgiveness is actually for you, not for the other person.
Well, yeah. And you want to think about the film with Mary. She's almost seeing her husband killed by her own father for his faith. And imagine what that had to be like. And I mean, Zack, you were talking about students that watch this film and realize that they came from broken families after seeing it. I mean, what was that like for you? I mean, watching this film and then for you to be like, oh my gosh, there's a lot more hurt than what you see on the surface level. I
think it's easy to tell people that you got to forgive until you're in the shoes where, oh, now it's my turn to forgive somebody for something that's been hurt. And you have to just replay the scenario over and over in your head, and you just get more angry and you just get more mad and you spiral and you start telling you know how it is. You have that conversation with somebody in your head a million times, like you would have said this.
In your car on the way home.
Yeah. After a Tuesday at 5:30.
Yeah.
And we all do it, and it's easier said than done. But what that does is it just creates bitterness in your heart, and you begin to not be able to sleep at night because you're thinking about something that this other person has no idea, most likely, that's on your radar, unless it's like this movie when they did it on purpose. But I think oftentimes we just lock ourselves in a cage of bitterness and we just poison ourselves. And so it can be something really big, like our students that are going through divorces right now with their parents. It can be mom walked out. It could be something as simple as the coach didn't pick one of our students to play on a team this weekend. And you have to walk through, like, am I willing to give this person the freedom so that I can free myself and have that forgiveness? It's easier said than done, but I would say our students after this summer, looking back, I would say that a lot of them really stepped into a place of forgiveness, and on the other side, they found freedom.
Yeah.
Was everything justified? No. Did mom come back? No. But they're able to see Jesus through it. and see themselves more alive through it.
I think when you can attack forgiveness head on, it's really difficult.
Mm.
I think the temptation is to, like, what do they say? Time heals all wounds or something.
Yeah.
And it's just, I think the temptation for a lot of people is just be like, I'll just give it time and I'll get over it. But, you know, that deep-seated stuff comes back.
Yeah.
And I don't know. What do you think about that? The whole concept of like for you guys, is it like, I'm just going to go and like confront this person and be like, hey, this is, you know, the feedback or whatever. This is the wrongdoing that I felt that you put in my life, and you're just over it? Or are you somebody that's like, I think I'll just wait?
Yeah, I'm a little bit of both. My process is, you know, when it is big things, because I think there's smaller incidences where it is appropriate to attack it dead on and, you know, go right there and go to the source and figure it out, have a conversation. But when it's big, life-changing things, like from this moment forward, everything is going to be different. I am someone that reminds myself of James 1 of being slow to speak, because my tongue will get me in trouble if I'm really heated, if I'm really hurt, because when you're hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
And so you want them to feel just like you. And so my approach that I have had to learn over a lot of years, and I'm still not perfect at it, is I wait. I give myself a 24-hour rule of when I'm angry, I don't talk to that person or say anything that I may regret down the line, because it's just going to cause further damage. So I will wait. I will first try to pray about it. And when I say pray, what that looks like for me is honestly having an honest conversation with God, yelling at him of, why would you let this happen? How could this happen? If they're someone that claimed to follow you, why are they doing this?
Yeah.
Why is this being done? And so it's honest and raw conversation with God of just where I'm at in this. And it's honestly, it's seeking out some wise counsel, if appropriate, from people, of being open to both sides of where I also may have done some wrong, which is really hard to admit for all of us sometimes. But I seek wise counsel. I get some advice on how to approach it. I try to remember their perspective in it. And then I will pray about it. I know it's can be a cliche answer, but it really makes a difference.
It's the last place you want to go sometimes.
Yeah.
It's prayer, but it really should be like sometimes at the forefront.
Yeah, it should be first, but we want to be the ones in control of fixing it when we have a God that is a God of redemption and fixing things. Like, that's what he's good at. And so I will pray about it and ask for guidance in the words to use, and also for some wisdom in knowing sometimes forgiveness, it doesn't excuse what they do, but that doesn't mean if we forgive that they have to come back into our lives.
Wow.
There's a thing of boundaries, right? Healthy boundaries. So if we forgive someone who has really, really hurt us, when you forgive, that doesn't mean they have to still be a part of your everyday life. You are allowed to put up some healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
It doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes forgiveness is we just talk it out. We say everything we need to say, and we wish the best for each other, because that's still someone that God created and that God loves. Even if it's hard for us to remember that God could love someone like that, he does, because that's what makes him God. And so sometimes it does look like stepping away. Like, that's part of the forgiveness and healing process too.
That's really good.
Something I've been learning through my time with my counselor this summer and this fall is that boundaries are okay. And I think for most of my life, I didn't know how to process anger at home because I felt like I was in trouble or I did something wrong if I was mad. And so I learned that I'm a shover. I shove it down. And so what I've been working through in this season of my life is how to deal with when I'm hurt by somebody, because for most of my life's habits, it's just been, just move on. Just don't think about it.
Yeah.
Try not to think about it. And that's not healthy. And that weighs you down, wears you down. And so I think it's easy for me to forgive somebody that didn't mean to harm me, but it's when there was true selfishness involved or maybe ill intent. That's when it takes me a little longer. And what I'm learning is we're all selfish. We're all broken. I'm going to hurt somebody else. But just because we reconcile, we forgive, doesn't mean we have to go back to the way it was. And I'm learning that boundaries are a lot like access. You don't give everybody access to your bank account. You give your wife or your husband access to your bank account. And in the same way, relationally, if there is hurt and forgiveness, allow Jesus to minister through that, to mend it, but you don't have to believe a lie that you have to go back to the way things were. And I think a lot of the time, forgiveness directly correlates with safety. Do you feel safe in this situation talking to somebody about it? And there's some seasons that it's just not safe for you to go and ask for forgiveness or have that conversation. But in other seasons, I think it just all comes back to safety.
I love that you guys are talking about counseling, because I think that's the one thing that, especially for men, like we are kind of like counsel averse. We're like, no, I'll shove it down and I'll deal with it. I'll just shove it down and it'll be okay. And someday I'll die. It's like,
I'm 31. That did not work.
Yeah. It's like, but man, the importance of counseling. And I've recently done the same, and just working through thoughts, emotions, your family situation, and how you were raised is so important. So if you're listening, man, you're feeling that press, and maybe this is hitting you somewhere, you go get counseling. It is so worth doing. That's Mary's part of the story, was seeking forgiveness, right?
Yeah.
And then we have Okath, the father, who was the tribe leader, who, when his son came back, his son Dennis comes back as a Christian, his father goes to have him killed.
Yeah.
But what ended up happening was, we talked about in the message on Sunday, mending relationships. And Okath mended his relationship eventually with Dennis and Mary, kind of in his, final days in the film. And he actually showed true remorse for what he had done. And I think that what's interesting is Okath's character kind of undergoes a pretty significant, I'd say, transformation in the story. So I guess how can people who have caused hurt or pain in relationships find the courage to mend things and practice repentance?
I think it comes down to humility. Where do you see yourself in the story of God?
Yeah.
Are you in charge of your story, or is God in charge of your story? A couple weeks ago, my sister found a hard drive with a bunch of photos on it from our teen years, from 2000 to 2012, and we thought this hard drive was gone. And so for the first time a couple weeks ago, I'm starting to see photos of my dad and memories that all of us have. And honestly, my teen years were not great. From age 11 to age 24, my dad was pretty unhealthy and struggled with mental health, and ultimately ended in taking his life in 2016. And I remember just a few nights back texting my mom as I'm seeing these photos, and I remember saying to her, I thought for sure that God was going to heal him and that he was going to change his ways. And if my dad had gone through counseling, if my dad had processed hurt at a very young age and didn't try to carry that with him his entire life, he might still be here today. And I look at the times where I've walked through major hurt and devastation, and I've chosen the humble path, the path that says, I'm going to be told no, I'm going to surrender, I'm going to submit even though I don't want to. And when I've gone through that, I've become better on the other side. I'm healthier, and I experience true joy. And it makes me think about Judas, who in the 11th hour took his life when Jesus died. And I read recently from a quote that his greatest sin wasn't that he committed suicide, it's that he didn't get to see Jesus redeem him on the other side. And so I think that if you take the humble path like this dad did, and you're willing to come mend it, you get the ultimate gift of joy, seeing your wrongs now made right. And there's a freedom just standing before Jesus, knowing that that's taken off your shoulders.
Yeah, that's good. I think it also has something to do with who's in your circle. Who do you have around you that is in your everyday life? Is it, family members? Is it a spouse? Is it really good friends, coworkers maybe? Who's in your circle that knows you almost better than you know yourself? And so there is that level of humility where you have to be open to receiving feedback, receiving maybe some criticism, which is really hard to do at times. But who do you have that is going to call you out, that is going to help you understand? Because when we are the ones doing hurt, sometimes we just don't know that we are. Sometimes we don't know we're being hurtful or mean. And sometimes because it's not our intention, right?
Yeah.
And so who do you have in your circle, your inner circle, that is not afraid to speak truth to you?
Yeah.
They're going to speak truth to you because they care that much about you. And they're going to call you out, and you're going to receive it in a way of, oh, this isn't personal. They're not trying to attack me. It's maybe I did do that.
Yeah, maybe going back to humility.
Yeah, maybe do some self-reflection like, oh, is that how that was communicated? I've heard it, the message communicated is the message received. So although I didn't mean to communicate it the way that they took it, how they took it is how I said it.
Yeah.
And so just being more mindful with your words, but it really is all boils down to humility and who do you have that's going to tell you.
And I think also there's something to who do you believe you are in all of this? Because oftentimes we're reacting and responding to other people through a false image of ourselves. So if you don't think very highly of yourself, you're going to cause hurt in people's lives in a different way, because you're not either going to give approval to them, you're not going to affirm them, you might not be present. So often we believe lies about ourselves. And this guy, he thought he was doing the right thing by having his son killed. He thought he was honoring the justice system in his life. And so I think it's getting back to the who are you when no one's around, and who do you believe Jesus says you are? I think that's a big piece of it.
Mm-hmm. When we're talking about mending relationships, the passage they used on Sunday, I think it was 2 Corinthians 7:9-10. And it said, yet now I am happy, not because you were made sorry, but because your sorrow led you to repentance. For you became sorrowful as God intended, and so were not harmed in any way by us. Godly sorrow brings repentance that leads to salvation and leaves no regret. But worldly sorrow brings death. Okath mended this relationship later in his life. But I guess the question I have is, how do you distinguish between godly sorrow and broken relationships in life and worldly sorrow? As you see right there in 2 Corinthians 7, why is it crucial for the process of mending relationships?
It changes everything, right? When you have a godly sorrow, it will cause you to want to turn 180 in everything that you're doing in life, and make you want to seek Jesus, make you want to seek the way that he is, because a worldly sorrow, it brings weight onto you, and it's just going to get heavier and heavier and heavier. The longer you go on, the longer you carry it, the longer you try to do it by yourself. There's no good that comes out of that.
Yeah.
Right? In a godly sorrow, there's good news.
Yeah.
There's hope. There's life. There's joy that can come out of it. In a worldly sorrow, this is how it is, and it can only get worse from here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Jesus, who is obviously supreme over this world, if you believe in him and you walk with him, sorrow's going to happen. This world's always going to be broken. But if you're walking in tandem with Jesus, you're seeing the good through it. And worldly sorrow just makes us believe that we're in a destroyed garden.
Yeah.
But when you have Jesus and his spirit and his theology, marking your life, you see him bringing this garden back to life in real time in front of you. And I can't imagine going through worldly sorrow without knowing Jesus.
Yeah, I can't either. I was talking about this the other day with some friends who were recently, I did a funeral about 4 weeks ago for some close friends. And it was the first funeral that I had done for friends, like that were, the deceased. And it was really hard. But, they were both believers. And I had led them through Rooted, which is our 10-week discipleship experience that we do here at Compass. And, you could see, based on the funerals that I've been a part of, that were not believers and the ones that were. And this was like celebratory, and it was like, hey, let's celebrate their life and the impact that they had. And I mean, I think my friend Robin, who also works here at Compass, said there was like 800 people at this funeral based on the impact that they had.
Wow.
And a mix of, the very artsy community, many of which were non-believers and believers alike, all together in one place. And they got to see the impact that these two believers, like the impact that they had in their lives from churches that they've been to in the past and art communities and all these different things. And you could see the godly sorrow in that place. Well, let's move on to Dennis. Dennis's story, who's the main character of this, right? And I love this line from the film. Dennis says, "We have a God who is almighty, that can stoop so low to pick you up from the dustbin and make you a somebody for his kingdom." And I just think, when I think of his life, it's completely marked by surrender to God. And so I'm just wondering from you both, have you ever felt the need to surrender control in your life? Like, what were the circumstances that led to that realization?
Yeah, I say my whole life story is just revolving around that surrender and perspective change.
Yeah.
From the outside, I grew up in a pretty great home. My parents were married. They loved us well. I'm the oldest of 4, and I have a brother with autism and a sister who was born deaf and got cochlear implants.
Wow.
And there was a lot in my life when I looked back. I think Zack said it earlier of, I didn't know what my normal was not normal until you went to college. And same, I didn't know that my normal of just some chaos and being mom number 2 and the amount of things we had to do, like I didn't know that wasn't normal until probably my senior year of high school. I didn't grow up in the church. In fact, actually my family was turned away from a church because they said they couldn't take my brother.
Wow.
And so that for me was like, well, I want nothing to do with you then, God. And so because there was so much chaos and just everything seemed, from a teenager perspective, seemed like if it could go wrong, it went wrong. And so I started to build my identity around sports, because that's the one thing I could control in my life. I feel like I couldn't control anything else. And the one thing I had was taken, because when I was 16, my family moved to a different state to get better services for my siblings. And it was in that moment, I had nothing. It from my teenager perspective. I felt like everything I had worked for and had dedicated myself to was taken, and I have nothing left to do. And it was right around that time where my family actually decided, we're going to give church another go. I don't know why, but we're going to try. And we went, and I'll never forget going. I didn't like it at first, the first few weeks, but I ended up going to their student ministry and had really great people come alongside me that taught me about, a lot of forgiveness and reconciliation and how to move forward, even though I feel like it's not possible, or it's not going to be as good as what I wanted it to be, what I had dreamed of. And I'll never forget sitting in there and for the first time realizing I'm not in control. God is in control. And even though it's not, my life hasn't played out the way that I have dreamt that it would, wow, has he shown up.
Wow.
He has still been present. He has still provided. He has still worked in my family's life. And I see that to this day, 12 years later, after that, I still see that moment of that realization of, okay, God, this is all you. I'm done trying. Like, I'm done trying to take control, and everything changed.
Thank you for sharing your stories, both of you. That's
Yeah.
really proud. And I know you shared a little bit of your story just a little bit ago, because I know that kind of ties into this question, but do you, to this day, is that something like you have to choose to surrender to God? Like, and just say, despite all these things that I feel like I need to be or want to be and who I am and what I've experienced.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that I'm a control freak. I did not know that until I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
And I had to always pick where I was going to eat lunch with people. And I think that what I realized is I'm a control freak because I'm afraid that if my outcome doesn't happen the way I want, then I'm going to be disappointed. And so there's fear involved. I don't want to be sad. I don't want to be disappointed. And so I try to get ahead of everything and stay on top of things. And I would come home from college break and try to pre-schedule every single meeting of every single person I was going to see. And I'm not even wired that way, but there was this deep fear that if I didn't reach out and I didn't see anybody, that no one would reach out to me. And so I think looking back on my first 2 or 3 ministry experiences before I came to work for Compass, I had so much fear of the unknown before I went to that first job. And I'm counting down the days waiting to hear back. And you're trying to control all this and you just spiral and you come to a place where it's like, do I trust that God has me on his mind or not? And I think I came to a place in my early 20s where I was not very good at living surrendered to the Lord when it came to the things that I cared the most about. And then fast forward to 2 years ago when we had our daughter Mariah, that's a whole new realm of surrendering. You have to surrender what kind of parent you're going to be, what kind of kid she's going to be. You have to surrender your finances. It caused us a lot of stress and still does. But I find that when I do open my hands and say, God, I trust that your better is better than my better, I can sleep better at night. And I can rest assured that, hey, things are okay. God is here right now.
Yeah.
He's with us. Everything's going to be okay. And sometimes for me, I just forget that God's in this. And I'm a pastor. I'm in ministry. And it's easy to tell yourself in the middle of a situation where there's hurt, it is easy to believe the lie that everything is falling apart and this is the end.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's so interesting. You guys are talking about this. So, Alex, you talked a little bit about, first of all, you talked about how you had to realize that with all these life changes, there's always different seasons where you're like, I've got to surrender to God. I'm not in control, right?
Mm-hmm.
And seasons where it's just like, God, where are you? Where are you in these times? You were talking about how there was a specific church that said, we can't take your brother. And that really was like, well, forget it. I don't want anything to do with this.
Mm-hmm.
For those that are listening right now, like, how can individuals who may have strayed from their faith or lost trust in God, kind of regain that surrender and trust in him?
Yeah. Something I have learned through counseling as well is a lot of times our anxiety, which anxiety is just, it's kind of the hot topic nowadays and it's more prevalent than ever before.
Yeah.
But when you think about it, anxiety is from a lack of control. And a lot of times I've had to take a step back and just be honest and where I'm at of, okay, why am I feeling this way? Why do I feel, anxious or like something's not right or I'm trying to control things? It's because there is that lack of control. And so I have to take a step back and say, okay, it's an everyday thing of God, you're in control. And so, I've been in those seasons where I have had a really hard time wanting to go to God, wanting to believe that he could take care of it. And it's, for me, I've noticed for me in my phone, I go into my notes and I'll just start typing out what I really think about him or what I really think about the situation.
Wow.
No matter, if it's not what is maybe people, it's like, oh, that's wrong to say. no, God already knows what I'm thinking.
I love that.
He's just wanting me to hear it and to say it. And, if you think about the relationships you have in your life, of when things start to really go wrong is when you give the silent treatment, because nothing is happening. There's no conversation. There's no steps being taken forward, just back. And same with God. When you're giving him that silent treatment, there is no progress to be made going forward, because you can't have that progress without conversation. And so no matter how brutally honest or maybe offensive it may be, write it down. Even if you don't want to say it, write it down. That's the first step.
I've heard journaling is just supposed to be really cathartic.
It really is.
I'm not a journaler, but I'm wondering if I should try journaling, because
You should. I don't do it often, but I have noticed when I'm going through it,
yeah.
writing it down, because sometimes it's maybe things you don't want to say out loud.
Yeah.
'Cause if you say it out loud, then it makes it even more true.
Yeah.
But if you write it down, it still gets it out.
That's really good. Zach, what do you think?
Yeah, I think when I'm looking at Dennis's story, this whole time it's just reminded me of the image of Joseph being thrown at the bottom of a well back in the Old Testament by his 11 brothers, because he was the favored brother. And so he went from a very good season to very bad season overnight. And God was redeeming that and working in it way before Joseph caught up to reality and realized what was going on. And so you fast forward and you see, because Joseph just stays down there and takes it day by day, God slowly teaches us through these seasons of pain, through these seasons as we come to a place of surrender. But I don't know if Joseph would have gone from the well to king or to the favor that he had he not chosen steps of surrender every single way. And so he could have easily closed his hands, tried to crawl out of that thing, do things his own way. But instead, he just waited on the Lord. And look at Dennis, like he literally had to wait for God to bring him back to life, for God to redeem him, to heal him. And then he had to wait a whole lot of time for his dad to come back around at the end of his life. I think sometimes we try to Instagram story this thing and try to make life make sense in 90 seconds. And sometimes it takes 2 to 3 years or 10 years or decades for some of these seasons to fully come to an end, where we see what God was doing all through it.
That's so good. You don't know what God's doing in every season.
There's just something about waiting on him through it.
And you just have to choose. Like, you just have to choose to move forward and say, all right, God, I'm just going to move forward with this and trust that you've got it.
Yep.
How can listeners begin to implement just principles of we've talked about forgiveness and mending and surrendering. How can they, what's the first step that you would recommend for listeners to take in surrendering their own lives after hearing kind of this story? First of all, go see the movie if you can find it.
I would say that something I'm learning with my counselor right now in this season is, in the military, if your general asks you to do something, you don't ask why. But you can say, what do you want me to know about that?
Yeah.
And so I think that if you're in a situation where you feel like there's surrender or forgiveness that is needed in your life, it is so okay to ask God, what do you want me to know about this situation? And then next, ask him, what do you want me to do?
That's good. I love that. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, I think it starts with conversation. I'm a big time advocate of talking with your circle. And, if the hurt has happened in your circle, then that's hard too. But I think it just starts with first being honest, take a step back, say, okay, today, God, you're in control, not me. Guide me in the way that you want me to go, with my words and with my actions. And don't be afraid to ask questions of why. Always ask the why behind things. But I think it just starts with taking some courage to say, I want better for myself and I want better for the people around me. Because when I'm my best, then the people around me are going to be their best as well. And so having that courage and the boldness to either initiate the conversation of, we need to talk about what has hurt me, or initiate, hey, I think I might have done something wrong. to have that courage.
That's good. I love it. Well, guys, thank you so much, Alex and Zack, for being on the podcast today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, this was really fun. And it's always just so interesting to hear not just perspectives, but stories, because I think stories unite us. And to hear about where you guys have been, what God has done, and what he's doing through you now. And look at what you're both doing. You're both leading people to know God better. He's used your stories for his greater purposes and to advance the kingdom in such a powerful way with students. So thank you for what you do.
Yeah,
Of course.
did not see that one coming, but
Yeah.
we're here.
See you on Wednesday nights, everybody.
Thank you for listening in on this episode of the Compass Podcast. Remember that every Monday we will launch a new episode. We look forward to seeing you, and make sure you subscribe.